And then there's this. President Trump, as I mentioned, put the word nasty in quotes in his tweet about Mayor Khan. Perhaps a nod to this next story. In the president's interview with the British newspaper The Sun, President Trump called the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, nasty for previous remarks she made about him. During the 2016 presidential campaign, the former actress called Trump misogynistic and divisive and said she would consider moving to Canada if Trump were elected. The Sun asked President Trump about those comments ahead of his official state visit to the UK.
She said she'd move to Canada if you got elected. Turned out she moved to Britain.
Well, that would be good. There are a lot of people moving here. So what can I say? No, I didn't know that she was nasty.
The president went on to say he thought it was nice that an American had married into the British royal family, was generally complimentary of Meghan Markle the rest of the way. However, President Trump since has repeatedly denied calling Markle nasty, including writing on Sunday that the remark was, quote, made up by the fake news media and they got caught cold. Well, you just heard it. The president again denied making the comment just before leaving on his to meet the royal family, including Markle's husband, Prince Harry.
No, I made no bad comment. Thank you.
So you heard it for yourself, Keir. How's this playing in the UK? Obviously, the president did use the word nasty. I guess the most charitable account you can give is that he was saying, I didn't realize she had said something nasty about me. But he did use the word.
Yeah. Well, he did use the word. Look, I read that as a classic British tabloid newspaper trap, and the President of the United States walked straight into it. Interesting that it was a tabloid trap by a newspaper owned by Rupert Murdoch. Interesting that the President chose to give that newspaper his interview and that they returned the favour in that way. On Sadiq Khan, look, I mean, it's beneath the presidency, really, isn't it, to get into an argument with the Mayor of London. The Mayor of London is a politician. The reality is that Londoners in particular are not particularly positive about President Trump. There will be many who are, but many who are not here. So in terms of votes, it works for the Mayor of London to be in a fight with the President of the United States. I suspect privately, behind closed doors, Sadiq Khan is rather enjoying it all. Prince Harry will be, as I said in my earlier comments, he'll be the arch diplomat because, look, in the end, this royal family are a professional group of diplomats. That's what their job is. And in terms of the question of the existential threat for the United Kingdom and Brexit, I mean, it's an interesting moment, isn't it, in which constitutional monarchy is being tested. I mean, the question in a visit like this, and a state visit is all about the British royal family. The politics is supposed to come second. The interesting question is, can the constitutional monarchy really hold together the people in this country and pull off a visit that cements the relationship between the United States and Britain, no matter what the politics, no matter how rocky it gets. We shall see, but certainly these are royals who have seen challenges with visitors again and again. Look, the dictator of Romania, Ceausescu, his entourage was so renowned for stealing things that when they stayed at Buckingham Palace, the story is that they had to remove things from the rooms to make sure that they didn't get taken away. So, this is nothing new to the royal family to have a politically difficult leader come. And after all, in the end, albeit President Trump, this is still the leader of the United States, Britain's most important partner, and that's the way that the leaders in the UK will see it.
Well, let's hope the Queen leaves out the silverware for the President of the United States. NBC's Keir Simmons, that meeting about an hour from now, a little bit less, between the President and the Queen, a ceremonial reception. We're in that beautiful building right behind you. Keir, thanks so much.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.